Thanks for doing the thing, bro.
Okay, what's going on here? Alrighty. So, ladies and gentlemen, the remixed theology of New York Hebrew Israelites. Yeah, what's going on, party people in the place to be? I go by the name of the BK Apologist, transmitting all the way live. New York is the city, Brooklyn is the borough. What's good? What's popping? Happy Monday to everyone. Of course, we gotta say what's up to the party people in the chat. We got my man Rome in the house. We got Wawo. We got most excellent Theophilus. We got JP Davis on the check-in. We got Bodega Lady Dean Yu on the check-in. We got the indelible, the incomparable king of all mods, Nate 2D2. And of course, you know, the queen of all mods is right there as well, Dean Yu. What's going on? Thank you, my Lord, my God. Yeah, I'm not Cherry Love, though that is my sister in Christ. And you're more than welcome to stay. I don't know if that was a mishap. But no, I am not Cherry Love, but we definitely rock out. So you're more than happy to stay. As always, ladies and gentlemen, if you can, please like, share, and subscribe. Please share the link. Tell a friend that it's him again. If you would like to support this online ministry, you can hit me on the PayPal, which is in the chat, or you could be a monthly subscriber on my Patreon, where you get an assortment of goodies to enhance your personal Bible study. So, with that out the way, we have a very good friend of mine's, very knowledgeable individual when it comes to the particular subject matter in hand. And give me a second here. Okay.
I can hear you.
No, something just popped up. All right. So we have Mr. Vocab Malone. What's going on, sir?
What's up? How you doing, man? Good to be with you, bro.
Chilling. Now, most of the people in the chat are acquainted with you, Mr. Malone, but for the uninitiated, if you could just quickly introduce the public to exactly who is Vocab Malone.
Man, Vocab is a guy that's getting older every day. Nah, man, I'm originally from the Midwest. I'm a Midwest kid at heart. That's 100% true. And I found myself out here in Phoenix, Arizona a couple of decades ago. And just began doing a lot of street evangelism in Phoenix and the surrounding areas. That led to street apologetics, and that led to encounters with the Hebrew Israelites, and that led to where we are today.
That was good, man. You're pretty good at that little synopsis there.
I have a future in radio.
Come on, let's go to work. Anyway,
broadcasting live from the most powerful tower in all of the United States, BK Apologist.
I like that. Then I need the bomb drop right there. Right. So you got that? Yeah, I know you got the bomb drop.
Hold on. Well, yeah. Let me flip that. I gotta hold on. Let me try. How about like with this? How about like this?
Okay, that'll work for now. You got to work on your sound effects. But what we will be discussing today is actually something. It's a continuation of a conversation and an investigation actually that occurred about 3 summers ago, I think, when Vocab came down to New York. It's the first time I actually met Vocab. He was here for an apologetic training conference, and he came here. David Wood, Adam Coleman, you know, the usual suspects. And so since he was in New York, he took advantage of going to some of the more hallowed spaces of One West Hebrew Israelism. So you actually went to the actual address of One West, and it's a Shake Shack now, right?
Yeah, although technically they were on the upper floor. So the Shake Shack is not literally where they met,
right?
Because there's like 2 levels to it. So the Shake Shack is the building but they were on the upper stairs, which I think it's an attorney's office now. We don't have access to that.
Right.
So we're in the building. We're at 1 West, but we're not literally in the same exact space. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Because that's where those stories come about throwing people down the stairs. There's a lot of stories about throwing people down the stairs, and that's because they were on the upper story, so they could throw people down flights of stairs. No joke, by the way.
Right. So, and one of the places he went to as well was the Schomburg. It's a library, and him and Adam, they went and they looked in the archives to find some more information.
Me and Adam in the Schomburg. Hold on. Me and I'm in the Schomburg.
There you go.
That's me with a rare book about William S. Crowdy, touted by some to be the first envisioner of Hebrew Israelism. And Adam was looking into some of his stuff, but that's a Schomburg library right there in Harlem.
Nice.
On Malcolm X Boulevard.
Yeah, right there, 125th. So, and you found some stuff about some of the more local Hebrew Israelism, right? The history of the New York, right, Hebrew Israelism. And if you could talk a little bit about that, because that's actually the subject matter for today's show. So if you could just talk, a little bit about that.
Well, it began with this. So if you look at the bottom book, so that's me in the Schomburg as well, next to some stranger that I can't show. If you look at that bottom book, last name is Dorman. So they had Dorman, Jacob S. Dorman, they have his doctoral thesis there. And for people who've heard me talk about the history of Hebrew Israelism before, there's a book I always highly recommend. Not a Christian author, he's a Jewish professor, called Chosen People. And this is published by Oxford, but this is a distillation of his thesis, which is much thicker, Dorman's thesis. And basically, Dorman has essentially turned his thesis into basically 2 books. It was thick enough to make basically 2 books. This is one of the books here, Chosen People, which is a great book. Well, as I was going through Dorman's thesis, because it's hard to get, you can't always easily get a thesis, and even someone's book, if they publish it, is not identical to their thesis.
Right.
2 different audiences, even if it is published on Oxford. So I'm going through his thesis, and I found some interesting stuff. And I realized later that it had actually appeared in other places, such as the journal article that we're going to discuss that you sent to me. But I didn't really realize any of that exactly until I saw it in the thesis. And I was going through and I said, what? What is this? And so what happened is he had photocopies and images from the archives at the Schomburg. So we're at the Schomburg reading Dorman's thesis, and in the thesis, he's talking about going through the archives at the Schomburg. So what it is if you go to the Schomburg, normally you're there, a lot of great stuff, but that's different than reserving a room and telling what the archive is, what boxes you want to look at, and this type of thing. That's a whole other process. We didn't have time and ability to do that. That's a lot more difficult. But you basically would be given boxes of actual primary sources. Like I have done this once before. It was at Talbot, and the person was like handing them to me with, like what we now think of as COVID gloves, pieces of paper to me, and they will only hand me one at a time. Wow. And so like they're beside me the whole time. And it's like kind of an odd thing, but you have to like look at this stuff and like, because these are sources where it's like, this might be the only copy of this thing in the world type of thing, Right. They're original things and stuff like that. And that's what I was looking at when I was in Talbot, and it was like in the basement, different. But I haven't been in the Schomburg archive part. But when I was going through Dorman's thesis, I did see it. And here's what's crazy. These archives at the Schomburg, not everyone even really realized the treasure trove that it is, including the great James Landing. This book, Black Judaism, is the most comprehensive book about the origins of different sects of Black Judaism. He kind of lumps it all together, but then he describes each one. And he does it by region, by city. He has a lot of stuff that no one has. This book is another necessary book. Even Landing didn't know before he passed away. He's dead now. He didn't know about the Schomburg. And so Dorman is really going through it, and now people have been going through it, looking for stuff related to Black Judaism, Black Israelism, is depending on what all these scholars have different names for what they call it.
Right.
And here's what we found: Wentworth Matthew was into Kabbalah, mysticism, Freemasonry, and even straight up magic. That's the essence of the lead up to the story. And we're going to explain who Wentworth Matthew is, but it was a bizarre find because I immediately was like, because so Sam was looking at separate stuff that he was interested in because he was looking at stuff related to Islam primarily.
Mm-hmm.
Adam was looking at stuff related to Black atheism and Christian apologists from Africa that are lesser known and stuff like that.
Right.
And some of those kinds of things. Mainly Abu and I are looking at the Israelite type stuff. And when we found this, we were looking at separate things, and we had a cameraman in there with us. So he's like taking pictures and photos and videos. Plus, we did some on our own phone. We had to kind of like be real chill about it because it's not like they want someone in there filming type of thing.
Yeah.
But we're doing all this, and I'm like, Abu. And they actually had to tell us to be quiet twice. We got like shushed, us, like that type of thing, because we were too excited finding stuff and all that. I was like, bro, and I was like, what? So we started looking at this stuff. It's just crazy. And so I took a bunch of pictures of that element of stuff. Specifically, Rabbi Wentworth Matthew drawing Kabbalistic talismans, like magical amulets, like he's drawing that are supposed to have some kind of power from some book that Matthew's looking at called the 6th and 7th book of Moses, which is not a real book or document. I mean, it's a real, but it's not really Moses' 6th.
Right, it's pseudo.
Yeah, and it came out way later, but it's Kabbalah, and it's like, yo, and Matthew is the founder of the Commandment Keepers, 1919. Add 50 years plus 1919, you get 1969. That's the start of One West. And the crazy thing is, we know about some of the 7 heads being involved with some weird occultic stuff. And again, I don't know how deep, where all the directions you want to go. I got a lot on my mind. You one who wanted to do the show, I'm ready.
Cool.
They got into some stuff later on, and now we're wondering if this was actually new and innovation, because some people saw it as an innovation that One West was getting into weird stuff, specifically trying to learn how to control demons. And I know what happens is every time I bring out stuff like this, let me just get on my horse for a second. I know you got slides.
Nah, go for it.
Every time I bring out stuff like this, the One West adherents today doubt me and call me a liar. And I'm not just saying me, I'm saying whoever, because Abu and a lot of people were involved with the research element of this. I'm sort of the loudmouth person that trumpets it out, right? So I'm not acting like I'm talking about Dorman's work. I'm not acting like I, discovered this. I'm relaying information. So I'm trying to be, but whenever I talk about this and bring it out for other people to generally hear for the first time, they call me a liar. They say that's made up. And then if they look into it, they find out I'm right. So if you're a Hebrew Israelite and you have an affinity for Wentworth Matthew and you think I'm lying, watch out before you say that. And if you think I'm lying about some of the 7 heads trying to read books to try to learn how to control demons. Now, this is not what the show's about today. Right. So that's not today, but I'm saying there's a connection. It's not really a reversion when they later on in the 70s were trying to learn how to control demons through occultic practices. It's simply a continuation of some of the weird mystical elements that were always there from the beginning of the Commandment Keepers. And so we see Commandment Keepers are not really an imitation of so-called mainstream Judaism. They're really multiple religions stuffed together in some weird new thing, including Pentecostal holiness, but including some stuff that's, let's just say, off the beaten path. And really, One Westism today is still that. Okay, so I'm going to slow down and calm down a little bit.
No, that's cool. It's funny. Me, CMB, and LC a couple of days ago, we just did a show on the 177th anniversary of the Great Disappointment with the Seventh-day Adventists. And of course, that happened in New York. Mm-hmm. And it just seems like all the weirdo stuff happens in my town.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
including you, bro.
Yeah, I'm a little weird. But in a good way. But so it just makes sense for me to talk more about, just the New York weirdness, right? When it comes to spirituality. And, we just talked about upstate New York. Now we're going to talk about Harlem and the 5 boroughs to a certain extent. So with that being said, let's get into this. This is a paper that Vocab was talking about, right? This is from the Nova Religio, the Journal of Alternative and Emergent Religions, right? Called "I Saw You Disappear with My Own Eyes: Hidden Transcripts of New York Black Israelite Broccolage," right? By Jacob Dorman, right? Now, for those who don't know what the term is, because I actually didn't know either, broccolage, right, in art or literature is the construction or creation from a diverse range of available things, or something constructed or created from a diverse range of available things, right? Us apologists, we would label that syncretism, right? So this is a broccolage. Wentworth had an assortment of sources that he combined and cobbled together in his theological framework. Okay, so with that being said, so in the article it says here, Black Israelite religious identity was imagined and performed in sidewalk lectures in the Marcus Garvey's Liberty Hall. It was embodied through Caribbean pageants and acted out in parades. Black Israelism was lived through secret spiritualist and Kabbalistic rituals, and taught openly through Sunday schools and Masonic affiliates. Finally, it was an identity that was formed and performed in a mixture of sanctified and Judaic rites. Print culture, performance, and complex social networks were all important to the imagination and realization of this new Israelite religious identity. All right, now recognizing the subversive quality of this broccolage and the complexity of its partial hidden transcripts belies attempts to exclude esoteric African-American new religious movements from the categories of protest religion and Black religion. When one combines the study of Black Israelism with similar studies of African-American NRMs of the 1920s, it is possible to appreciate a remarkable wave of overlapping esoteric religious creativity that accompanied the much more famous artistic creativity of the Harlem Renaissance. So as you have this great, I guess this is part of the Great Migration to the East, it's a hotbed of creativity, whether we're talking about playwrights, musicians, poetry, Black empowerment, and it's within this milieu, right, that you see these syncretistic religions forming in these Black societies. Vocab, you want to share anything before we continue, sir?
Well, it's interesting the way Dorman is framing it. He's almost like saying, the Harlem Renaissance was this time of unparalleled creativity within one geographical space. And he's like tying in the new religious movements that came about at that time with that spirit of creativity and boundary breaking. Right. Whenever he says NRMs, because I know NRMs was in that little abstract you just read there. Mm-hmm. NRMs, everybody, means new religious movements. Scholars of religion don't like, generally speaking, these days to use the term cult because they understand it has negative societal implications, almost like a value judgment. And so they stay away from cult and kind of use the term NRMs, new religious movement. And there's a question of what qualifies as a new religious movement, Sometimes you hear the phrase thrown about as well. Alternative spiritualities. It's another term sometimes you'll see. So NRMs is new religious movement. So he's talking about the new religious movements of then, again, recognizing the newness of Hebrew Israelism, regardless of what Hebrew Israelites say. I mean, we got to remember that all the religions coming out around this time, all of them claim to have a connection to the past. No one wants to be brand spanking new like that. But what they would do is essentially had to create a revisionist history for this to be possible. Mm-hmm. Whether it was the Moors, whether it was the Nation of Islam, whether it was the Hebrew Israelites, whoever it was, that's exactly what they did. And you can see how they struggled to find it. Because if you study the beginnings of Hebrew Israelism in America, especially in New York, they initially connected themselves to Ethiopia. Right. And the reason is because that was the only essentially Black Jewish community they could find. It was later on that they kind of like did away with that as a project for the most part. and made it, well, actually connected to the transatlantic slave trade. They did away with the Ethiopian connection and more emphasized the transatlantic slave trade element. And so Dorman is saying that Hebrew Israelism is polycultural. It's it's different strands put together to make this. And one of those is Kabbalistic magic. That's one of the things that was there at the Commandment Keepers, practiced by Wentworth Matthew. So when you say, well, what are these drawings? You know, these drawings you mentioned, you're saying you're going to show and all this, they're from Wentworth Matthew's unpublished manuscript. Now, I don't know, or do we call it a notebook or a journal? I think the way it's referred to in the writing is a manuscript. Does that mean he was going to publish it? Does it mean it's what he taught? It's unclear exactly, but it's not stuff that outsiders ever heard him really talk about.
Right.
And that's another element of especially initial phases of Hebrew Israelism, is the way they would speak to sort of outsiders when they were there, when they speak to them, versus the way they speak amongst themselves. So we don't exactly know, but we know this is what he was doing and writing and talking about in this manuscript that is at the Schomburg, you know, and that appears in photocopies in Dorman's work.
Right. And speaking of how he spoke to the in-house crowd, right, great segue. It says here, one evening after Friday night services had concluded, Rabbi Wentworth Arthur Matthew, head of the Ethiopian Hebrew Commandment Keepers synagogue in Harlem, turned to the dozen worshipers in the audience and began speaking on the familiar theme of his magical abilities. He spoke about this before. They were used to him talking about his magical abilities. Turning to Brother William, Matthew asked for a witness that he had made himself invisible with a wave of the hand. Quote, "Yes, you did," corroborated Brother William. Quote, "I saw you disappear with my own eyes." Immediately, the rest of the worshipers, all women, rose from their seats and shouted ecstatically, "Hallelujah, the Lord loves our teacher. Let us sing Adon Olam." The rabbi roared, quote, "Let us sing so that all our enemies will know that we are the chosen sons and daughters of Jehovah." So the good rabbi here had magical abilities and had the ability to make himself invisible. And he had a corroborated witness like, "Yes, I saw you disappear with my own eyes."
Forget Ralph Ellison. This is the real Invisible Man.
This is crazy. I mean, this is in-house. He's speaking to his people, right? And it's interesting that he notes that it's all women, right? So I don't know what that means. I know just in general, you know, any movement, if it's going to stand, needs women to really be a part of it. So I think the fact that it was all women was by design, in my opinion. You know, so, but yeah, he's talking about how he could disappear. Okay. Metaphoric identification with the children of Israel and the Exodus narrative had long been an acknowledged feature of African American Christianity in the 19th century. However, from their origins in the 1890s until the present, Black Israelites have moved from metaphoric identification to literal identification as the people of the book. There were many sects of Black Jews during the 1920s, from the South to Chicago and Harlem, and many of these had more members than Matthew's Ethiopian Hebrews or gained more wealth and notoriety. But Matthew practiced a religion that preached descent from the ancient Israelites while pioneering the incorporation of Jewish ritual, Hebrew language, and kosher culinary practices. So, and I think, again, just being from New York and being neighbors with the Hasidic community, it seems that, you know, he added the rabbinic Judaism to his broccolage. Your thoughts, Vocab?
So there's a lot here, right? And Dorman, first of all, puts out scholars and really casual observers have known for a long time the importance of the Exodus narrative within Black American Christianity. And it makes sense. Americans are like the Egyptians, keeping us in slavery. We're like the children of Israel in bondage unjustly. But then, you know, he notes how it became a a thing where at some point it got identified in a literalistic way. And the interesting thing is, if you read the accounts of F.S. Cherry and William S. Crowdy, two of the first people to bring out Hebrew Israelism, they both chalk up their knowledge to the fact that Black Americans are Israelites to visions. Neither of them say, oh, after some in-depth study of the text, this is here, or I was taught this by somebody else. Both of them, F.S. Cherry and William S. Crowdy, both chalk it up to visions. Almost around the same time, there's various dates given for when F.S. Cherry officially started. And so the earliest you'll sometimes hear is 1886. Sometimes you hear people push it all the way to when he incorporated his first church. Crowdy's a little more established as far as when he really established something, 1896. But he was doing stuff in 1892, it appears. So right around that time, neck and neck, both visions. That shows you that, first of all, this was a new thing. It's like Joseph Smith with the vision. Right. You know, if someone's already talking about it, you don't need a vision to establish it. And the other guy, William Christian, who less is known about, he doesn't quite say a vision in my research, but he says that it was from a sort of a conversation with the Lord. He talks like the Lord showed me I wasn't teaching right, because he was a Protestant minister prior. William Christian is someone we don't talk a lot about, but was also one of the main founders, because they're all right around the same time, late 1800s, of Hebrew Israelism. And I think that's interesting. And that's how it's kind of set up. So this is a new thing. And now you have Wentworth Arthur Matthew establishing the Commandment Keepers in 1919. And here is a picture of him with the congregation there, right there in Harlem.
Yep. So, big up to Dr. David Folk. He's in the building. Subjective experience trumps objective truth every time. Good grief.
Dr. Folk, could you ask him, or Dr. Folk, are you going to be at ETS this year? I'm going to be at ETS in Fort Worth soon, and I've seen him there before. In fact, one time I saw him grilling, who's the British guy?
David Roll.
I saw him grilling David Roll. And I remember
they're best buddies.
Huh? What?
They're best buddies. No, they're not. Yeah,
they didn't seem like best buddies.
No, they weren't.
At this conference, it was very interesting. And so I just I wonder if he's going to be there again.
So Mr. Falk, if you can answer that, and when you can, that'd be great. That's my guy right there. Make sure you subscribe to his channel. He does amazing work. You know, he's an actual expert in the field of Egyptology and a man of God. So he is a unicorn in that aspect. So definitely like, share, subscribe, what he does. So let's continue here. Scholars have tended to view Black Israelite leaders as mercenary, derivative, and imitative. As with many accounts of new religious movements, some observers have portrayed them as hucksters who prey on their praying followers. Other observers have suggested that Black Israelites either imitated Jews or were descended from Jews in Africa or the Americas. However, with closer analysis of the existing evidence, as well as the acquisition of a small collection of vital Black Israelite records by the Schomburg Center of the New York Public Library, we can see that Black Israelites did not simply imitate Jews, but rather were brocolors who constructed a polycultural religion that creatively reworked threads from religious faith, secret societies, and magical grimoires. All right.
What's that word? I'm gonna look that up. That last word.
A grimoire is basically a book of magic.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yes. A grimoire is a book of magic.
Yeah, I think Skeletor had one of those.
He could have. I think
Mumra probably had one.
Well, Doctor Strange has a whole bunch of them.
I think
the books that he studied, those were all grimoires. Those are magic books. Just have to learn how to do incantations, special drawings of prayers, which we'll get to in a second.
I think Orko had one. Evil Lynn had one.
Right. So this is part of the hodgepodge patchwork theology that Rabbi Wentworth was creating for his followers.
And you see that secret societies? Mm-hmm. We haven't even brought this out yet, but a lot of the founders of Hebrew Israelism were Freemasons. And in fact, there's something called Codex Magica, which we don't take to be an authoritative source, but some of the Hebrew Israelites utilize to try to say, oh, look, that guy's doing that symbol, that sign means this or that, right? So check it out. There's some evidence that the hand sign the Hebrew Israelites do like this is a Masonic sign. According to Codex Magica, it is. Oh, looks like the brother won't be at ETS this year. I'm going to miss you. Next year, let's go on BK Apologist channel and raise the funds to make sure we can get Dr. David Falk to ETS. That's what needs to happen next year, bro. You need to super chat that man to death.
Yes, sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah, here's the new bringing in the violence. Young Pharaoh has one.
What?
Does he have a grimoire
or one of those books?
Wow. That's wow. Breaking news. I didn't know he had a grimoire. Wow. All right, so let's keep going. Matthew's Commandment Keepers Church of the Living God began as a Christian church and progressively incorporated more Jewish rituals and decreased the prominence of Jesus as the decades passed. Let me just stop there for a minute. It's interesting that he says this because unfortunately we see a lot of people who claim that they did their research and found out that they are genetically linked to ancient Israel, which is fine. And there shouldn't be an issue with that on paper. But a lot of times when we see people do that, it's almost as if it's a Trojan horse. There's not for all Hebrews, but for some, right? This identity that they've awakened to seems to become a Trojan horse for all sorts of false doctrine.
Yeah, in fact, when he started out, he was not Rabbi Matthew. In 1934, and Dorman documents this on page 163 of his book, he was calling himself Bishop Matthew. And he had a school, and it says this is a quote from, I guess, the literature. Matthew ran the, quote, Bishop's Ecclesiastical School of the Commandment Keepers, Church of the Living God, the Pillar and Ground of Truth, Inc., which was open to, quote, churchmen and men from educational centers. But by 1940, he began using the title rabbi. So somewhere in between 1934 and 1940. So when he first started off, he's still calling himself a bishop.
Right.
The crazy thing about Commandment Keepers is in the beginning, they had Jesus Christ in the New Testament as part of their worship. They became more Judaistic, whatever you want to call it, over time and dropped that later on and became sort of more Black Jewish in their orientation.
Right. Well, according to this, at the beginning, when he incorporated the church with the state of New York in 1921, he added, quote, and the faith of Jesus Christ to the name, an appellation that remained until the late 1960s.
Mm-hmm. And there's video with old timers talking about the Commandment Keepers, and they mention that. And the crazy thing is, in one of these videos that I watched, the lady refers to the Jesus Christ as the hook. And that particular phrase caught my attention because according to old timers who knew Rabbi Abba Bivens claimed the 12 tribes chart was a hook to draw people in. He used the same phrase, a hook, because he said, that's not right. And he says, yeah, I know it's not right, but it's a hook to draw them in and we plug them into the truth.
Right.
Interesting, man. Interesting.
Now, the rabbit hole goes deeper and deeper. Even as blacks moved in and whites and Jews left central Harlem during the 1920s, Jews retained a small presence as shopkeepers, landlords, and residents in the area, bringing them into close proximity to the expanding African-American community. As the number of Jews in Harlem fell, though, Matthew increased the amount of Judaic ritual in his church and the importance of Jewishness in his faith. In 1923, he celebrated his first Passover. In 1929, his synagogue was receiving some financial aid from Jewish synagogues. And in 1930, Matthew, still using the title, quote, bishop, celebrated Rosh Hashanah with 6 Jews of European origins among the 175 congregates. In the same year, the congregation purchased a Torah. So he was worshiping with Esau?
Yeah. Well, here. I'm sorry. And by the way, he did teach the Esau doctrine. He did teach the Esau doctrine. In fact, I have a quote in my book by Matthew where he says Esau, had that hairy skin like a white man, is paraphrase. But I remember this phrase. It says, and Jacob had smooth skin as the black man's invariably is. And so, yeah, he taught that doctrine. But check this out. Dorman notes in his book that by 1944, the transition was complete. And someone asked a question about Jesus, and Matthew rebuked him with this quote, and it's footnoted and everything. Your Jesus has been dead a long time. Or actually, your Jesus has been a long time dead. That's the exact quote. Your Jesus has been a long time. So he's such a picture of what Hebrew Israelism tends to do to people. They start out with just sort of an identity claim, have these Christian trappings, and little by little, a lot of that gets taken away.
Right.
And next thing you know, Jesus didn't rise from the dead. It was a process that took him to get there. But by 1944, from 1919 to 1944, he's saying Jesus is dead.
Wow. Crazy. So what made Matthew's religion different from varieties of Black Israelism that arose in Memphis, New Orleans, Philadelphia, Chicago, Jamaica, South Africa, and even New York in later decades was the fact that he adopted the ritual forms of Judaism to augment his Black Israelite identity. Excuse me. He was actively combining Jewish rituals with customs, beliefs, and rituals derived from African American Christianity and conjuring. The beautiful chanting of Hebrew, the observance of dietary laws, and the swaying motions of prayer were some of the most powerful performances in and through which African Americans became Israelites. Yet, beneath the public transcript of Jewish rituals and Matthew's sermon lies a hidden transcript that gets closer to the core of Matthew's faith. You can almost hear the dun, 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 right? Harlem's Black Judaism was part of the Black nationalist search for economic and cultural self-sufficiency, championed in the interwar period by Jamaican-born organizer Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Garvey's mixture of race pride, Black nationalism, and messianism inspired thousands of Black men and women who were open to alternatives to conventional Black Christianity. So this is a very volatile and creative time in the history of New York and specifically Harlem, right? You got the Renaissance, you have the Black and I'm Proud, you have, Marcus Mosiah Garvey and his organization. So there's a lot of talk of, just rising up from oppression. And, Wentworth finds himself in this conversation somehow. I don't know if you want to touch on that a little bit, Vocab, before we continue.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of a significant amount of these early guys, the Hebrew Israelites that we see later on, at some point had a touch point with one of Marcus Garvey's organizations. And some of them, it seems, even tried to get him to move in that direction, but then he wouldn't. And so they did their own thing. But I don't know if I can finish my thought earlier. What I was saying is how a lot of these early Hebrew Israelite guys were Freemasons. When you look, Cherry was, Crowdy was, and it appears that the Commandment Keepers at one point. Let me see. Let me see where I just wrote this. Yeah. The Commandment Keepers appear to have their own Masonic lodge. So it appears. Let me see here. Where's the source for that? I got it right here. Yeah, it's called the Royal Order of Ethiopian Hebrews. The Royal Order of Ethiopian Hebrews, and the author describes it as their secular lodge. So, according to that, they operated their own Masonic lodge as well. So, it's interesting because you find a lot of Hebrews like to attack Masons, but a lot of their big people back there were Masons.
Meanwhile, you got traveling men with fringes.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah. We know Crowdy and Cherry were.
Right.
And now we know that you've got the Commandment Keepers running their own lodge. I mean, Freemasonry is apparently right there in the beginning with Hebrew Israelism.
Wow. That's crazy. All right, let's continue. In the late 1920s, Matthew preached to passerby from a step ladder in the tradition of Harlem street speakers. So, when you see IZPK in the corner on 125th Street, they didn't invent that, okay? It was already happening. One member of the Commandment Keepers remembered it was 1927 when I first saw Rabbi Matthew on Lenox Avenue. He was standing on a ladder with a yarmulke on, and he was speaking to a crowd of people. He was preaching that we were not Christians as they had told us, but we were the lost house of Israel. Gee, that sounds awfully familiar. One of the most important of these was a Garveyite named Bishop John Hickerson. He also went by the name the Rev. St. Bishop Divine, the Bishop Esoph Ben David. Before coming to Harlem, Hickerson had lived and collaborated with George Baker, the future Father Divine. In Baltimore. There, they developed a new thought-based doctrine that God dwelt inside the individual. New Thought was a philosophy of positive thinking that had developed in 19th century New England and which taught, according to Jill Watts, quote, that God existed in all people, that the channeling of God's spirit irradiated problems, and that unity with God guaranteed salvation. Let me just get this real quick. Hickerson helped to spread the new thought that God dwelt inside charismatic leaders and their followers, a concept that was at the heart of the, quote, Jewish, Hebrew, or Black Israelite beliefs of his followers and associates, both famous and obscure. All right, now it gets interesting here, right? The Black Israelite / New Thought theology was based on the works of French-American author and publisher William Laurent de Laurence. Who made his name by translating and publishing magical works, okay, from around the, quote, Oriental world. His books have been widely circulated and remain highly respected among practitioners of Afro-Atlantic religions, such as Santeria and Voodoo. De Laurence's works played critical roles in the genesis of 20th century alternative African American religions, such as the Moorish Science Temple's Black Islam, Rabbi Matthew's Black Judaism, and Leonard Howell's Rastafarianism. So all these pro-Black, right, theological frameworks came from a white Frenchman.
You found a picture of him?
He's right there. Yes, that's him.
And you know, one of the books we're going to be talking about that he wrote, it's publicly available at Archive. So if you guys wonder what we're talking about,
Actually, I'll get to that right now.
Find it.
Get that right now. Here it is. Rabbi Matthew used de Laurence's writing to create magical rituals. Let's say that again. Rabbi Matthew used de Laurence's writing to create magical rituals and the Hebraic creed that allowed him to be filled with God's spirit. Matthew based what he called his Kabbalistic science on the most popular of de Laurence's books, the 6th and 7th books of Moses. Now, Vocab, when I saw this book, it blew me away because this book is sold all over New York. When you're in downtown Brooklyn, yes, when you're in downtown Brooklyn, you know the open air book vendors?
Yeah.
They sell this book.
Oh, so you've seen this before?
My whole life. I just like whatever. It just seems weird. I never paid it no mind. They sell it in Harlem right now. If you go 125th right now, this Saturday, and to especially the more pro-Black book vendors, you find this book here next to other esoteric pseudo-pseudepigraphical craziness. You find this book right now, bro. Right now.
Well, so it's deceptive because Moses, of course, is a important biblical figure. And then he held an especially important place, especially within Black Christianity, as sort of the figurehead of the Exodus, right? And so what you have is that Moses is the ultimate final author of the first 5 books. Well, yeah, they turned him into something else, yeah. Right. But, you know, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. So there's 5 books of Moses. This purports to be lost spiritual secrets that Moses had that were essentially magic. So this is the 6th and 7th books of Moses. And so now it's turning him into, like what you said, Sorcerer Supreme. Right. And Rabbi Matthew used some of these magic rituals because this is basically like has the guise that it's like Hebraic magic, including one that allowed him to be filled with God's spirit. and he called it Kabbalistic science.
Bro, they used the same cover. This cover, they didn't change the cover. It's the same cover. So when I saw that, I immediately remembered it. But again, it's and for those of us who are believers, you know, when they come at you and saying Christianity is the white man's religion, it's very hypocritical for them to make that accusation when if you're a Rastafarian, if you're a Moorish American, if you're a Hebrew Israelite, a lot of your framework derives from this white Frenchy dude who has this, you know, a grimoire of Moses' magical arts. It's like, really? You're the last person to talk about us worship, you know what I mean? And again, and not that white people, you know what I mean? I'm just saying that's their argument. That's their argument. So, but anyway, let's yeah, it's wild, bro. It's wild.
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, Rabbi Matthew is claiming ultimately through this Kabbalistic science to be able to make himself invisible. This reminds me of Mystery Men. You ever see the movie with Ben Stiller? He's like Mr. Rage or something. Mr. Furious. I forget what it is, but it's like these reject superheroes who don't really have very valid powers. Yeah. And there's a guy, they're taking newcomers to their group, and there's a guy who says he can make himself invisible, but they have to shut their eyes. So they have to close their eyes.
Yo, CMB has a question for you, Vocab. He's like, what would you call a Hebrew sorcerer supreme Octor Strange?
Oh my God. These are jokes only like apologetic guys would get.
We're nerds here, bro. We're all nerds. But
I'll try to think of one, but that's pretty good. I guess we'll start there. Octor Strange.
So this 6 or 7 books of Moses, right? It's a manual of magic.
And the claim is that Moses used this, and it's like lost, and now the white fringy dude, as you said, is bringing it out.
Right. The claim to divulge the Kabbalistic secrets of ancient Hebrews. The work purports to be a collection of ancient Hebraic sacred texts, diagrams, incantations, and prayers attributed to Moses. Matthew's personal papers in the Schomburg Library in New York include 2 amulets of geometric designs and Hebrew words borrowed in part from the 6th and 7th books of Moses. These amulets offer an unparalleled view into the hidden transcript and the private settings where Rabbi Matthew performed the most secret, transformative rituals at the hidden heart of Black Israelism.
This is crazy. So let me read a little bit more. This is from Dorman's book.
Yeah, go for it.
About De Laurence. So Lauren William De Laurence. He's a former hypnotist based in Chicago, and he made his name by publishing English translations of magical esoteric works from around the world. And he testified, Alfredo, that he's seen these things, right? And De Laurence loved certain biblical quotations that basically make the immanence of God basically become where you kind of are God, where he's dwelling in you so closely. It's like this link. And so he loved to say the kingdom of God was within you, but in this certain kind of meaning. You are the temples of the living God. The kingdom of God is within you. You are the temples of all those kind. The Father is in me, I in him, and we in you. And by the way, if you study Father Divine later on, Dorman puts out that this is a lot of the same kind of stuff he would say later on. So here it is. This is his most popular books, and it's a manual of magical seals and spells. And there's a thing called conjuring, and conjuring really is basically witchcraft, but it sometimes crept in to certain churches, kind of like folk Christianity to an extent. And so you would sometimes see, especially in Pentecostal holiness churches. And let me go back here a little bit and read about conjuring real quick. And by the way, some of this relates to weird stuff that we see in the modern era. Like when Paula White was claiming to grab African angels to fight COVID.
For the election, not COVID, for the election.
Oh, for the election. So I lose track between Kenneth Copeland and yeah. What am I saying? For the election, yeah. The African angels to fight for the league, whatever. That is like that kind of thing. So let me read a little bit here about conjuring and sorcery, okay? Conjure, by the way, is a good word meaning compel. Well, actually, see, that's a quote from somebody. Hold on. Years ago. See, this is a quote from Matthew's. This is a quote from one of Matthew's sermons. So let me read real quick here. So Howard Brott studied the Commandment Keepers very closely and did a number of articles, including this small little book, The Black Jews of Harlem. This is an old book, and he quotes from a sermon here, and this is Matthew speaking, right? Listen to what he says, because notice we've only given some quotes, but now let me quote at length from a sermon that says what we're saying. This is Rabbi Wentworth Matthew speaking right now. I'm quoting him from a sermon. Okay, I just need to reiterate that. Years ago, I gave a complete course in Kabbalistic science. I am a doctor of metaphysics and studied mental telepathy.
Wow.
I can tell your thoughts.
This is a sermon?
This is a sermon. This is a sermon by Rabbi, and it's on page 163 of Dorman's book. He's referring to Brotz's early work, okay? It took 7 years to complete the course. Learned how to stop rain, heal the sick. I was in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I said, I hear a voice speaking to me right now. Then I said, Mother Johnson, please go see Mother Hubbard right now. She lived in a shoe. Just kidding. When I got back to New York, I saw Mother Johnson, who said, I was working on my laundry when I heard the rabbi's voice to go see Mother Hubbard, and it was a good thing I went because she was in trouble. Is that conjuring? Is that sorcery? So he's defending himself there.
Wow. He's
saying what happened, then he's saying, is that conjuring? Is that sorcery? Because apparently he had been accused. Now, this is continuing on with this is still Wentworth Matthew's sermon, okay? Conjure, by the way, is a good word, meaning compel. Here, I take this match and strike it and compel it to light. The Negroes call it conjure. The whites call it conjure. The atomic bomb is a matter of conjuring, and so are all the forces. The word isn't so bad, but the poor Negro from Africa was made afraid by the Gentile master. So he's claiming white folks made black folks afraid of conjuring, which he's basically saying, like, they made you afraid of your Hebraic magic. But I've mastered it, and so I can make the rain stop, hear voices, make people disappear, and read people's thoughts. I'm sorry.
Wow.
And we thought GMS was out of pocket for saying they could read spirits. This is a whole other level.
Well, by the way, where it comes from.
The elders do claim to be able to read spirits, by the way.
Wow. So this is the precursor to all that.
Exactly. And that's the point. All these things are connected. That was the only secret he had, and the Gentile taught him to be afraid of spirits. Kabbalistic science is one of the branches of mental telepathy. Those who thought it conjuring had a dark cell in their minds. This is an angelic science. Has nothing to do with rabbit's foot, spiritualism, or conjuring spirits out of a graveyard. The spiritualists set you against your best friends, lead you into the numbers racket, use dirt and filth, dead man's fingers, grave dirt. So he's talking about what he's describing as almost like dirty, like almost like dark magic or something like that, when he's saying that's not what he's doing. Kabbalistic things are parchment. The science of Israel is a big thing. It's why we use talisman, which Dorman has in brackets, a Jewish prayer shawl with knotted fringes. I'm saying it wrong. I pronounce it wrong. Candles and incense. The Catholics faintly imitate us.
Wow.
You know, those Catholics that have been around for a long time are imitating the Hebrew Israelites. Do you think the 3 Hebrew boys who went into the fiery furnace went in saying, Laudi Jesus? They knew how to pray. They went into the furnace anointed with the oil of life, which we can't take up tonight. And they tell me that when they came out, they didn't even smell of smoke. Now, it's a little bit ambiguous. It seems like he's implying that what the Hebrew boys did to avoid the fire was Hebraic magic.
Right.
It seems like what he's applying there from that. Almost like he's like putting it together with prayer in a way as well.
Right.
And so
right.
We got to reiterate, this dude is saying in front of visitors and guests, hey, remember that time I made myself disappear? And the guy's like, yeah, I saw you disappear with my own eyes. Yo.
I can read minds, and I have the eye of Agamotto and the cloak of levitation. And he might as well just keep going, all right? And just keep saying all that. It's crazy. But so, and I'm glad you said that about the incantation, the amulets, because here's one of the primaries. This is the square amulet in Matthew's personal papers, was modified from, quote, the second table of the spirits of fire found on page 16 on the 6th and 7th book of Moses. All right, this is
right
from
there.
His own pen. All right, this is his own amulet. Right, and let's get into that a little bit. It says here, the amulet can be translated, rise and give me good luck within the 8th fire. You should give me life, the 8th God, my Father. And here's a blow up of the diagram. It's an incantation for good luck. All right, but let's continue here. It says the two amulets shed light on Matthew's esoteric theology, part of the secret knowledge at the heart of his Black Israelite belief. Matthew wrote several phrases in fractured Hebrew on the diagram, the top one of which can be translated, quote, rise and give me good luck. Just below the median line, the Hebrew can be translated, within the 8th fire, you should give me life. And the bottom line may read either the 8th God should be my Father, or the 8th God, my Father. At the simplest level, this diagram appears to be a good luck charm, but at a higher level, this amulet amplifies and expands on Matthew's theology. Vocab.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
How crazy
So,
is that?
This, you just saw, there's a square Hebrew diagram. There's not a date on it, but it's from the Wentworth Matthew's collection at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. And the way you can find it is in the Wentworth Matthews collection, Manuscripts, Archives, and Rare Books Division. So this is housed in a real place that I visited. I wasn't able to go into the boxes, which is what I've had to do to see this. But it's really there. And what's so wild about it is it's copied and modified from our white Frenchman's work. Laurent William de Laurence, his work, the 6 and 7 books of Moses, the second edition, which was published in 1900. And here's what's crazy. Remember, this is for good luck. This is like Kabbalistic science-y stuff. They're saying it's science, but it's essentially magic with...
It is a rabbit's foot. He said it wasn't. It is a rabbit. It's just instead of an actual foot, it's a diagram. It's the same thing.
Yeah, he's saying it's not, but that is what it is. See, that's what's so funny. It's such an interesting thing. I had a friend that used to mentor me, and he was a financial advisor. He'd always say, Vocab, let me teach you something. Whenever somebody says to you, it's not about the money, for that person, it's all about the money. He's like, whenever someone says it's not about the money, that lets you know it's all about the money.
Right.
I always thought that was funny. And my point is, you know, it's so interesting. These people will like totally disavow. It's not a rabbit's foot. It's not this. And then it clearly is that. It's just a Hebrew version of it.
Right.
It's sprinkled on. It's a glaze of old school magic with some Hebrew characters. And notice Dr. David Falk just pointed out how common that was in Gnosticism. These are common things that pop up in false religions. But yo, man, I know everyone out here is not reformed, but I know every evangelical Christian believes in the sovereignty of God. And I know we might define it somewhat different. We all believe, though, God's all powerful. He's in control. He's providential in how he moves in this world. We don't rely and look upon stuff like this. And what does this show? Because someone, I think, is going to miss and say, well, that doesn't mean we're not the people of the book. Something like that. Or someone's going to say, that just shows you shouldn't mess around with those white Jews. So someone's going to say something like that.
Pretty
right.
much.
To me, there's a lot of points in here. Number one is, at every level, when you look at the pioneers of any version of Hebrew Israelism, there's always a lot of unsoundness. There's always a lot of aberrant, unorthodox theology and things that are problematic biblically, and even to a lot of modern day Hebrew Israelites would understand how problematic this is, right? And so pointing out that that's at the foundation of this. This is not some movement with a healthy beginning that now is like, you know, devolved into something. It's something that's problematic from jump. The root of the tree is filled with error and mistakes and confusion. And, you know, I mean, he didn't publish this, so I don't want to quite say plagiarism, but he adapted it. And here's what's so interesting. Someone might be like, well, how do you know he got it from there? Well, there's a way we know. There's a way we know that Matthew got it from the Frenchman's book of magic spells. It's because he made a copying error in his Hebrew. Matthew imitated the same error in Hebrew that the Frenchman did, meaning the Frenchman made an error in his Hebrew, and Matthew's little Kabbalistic talisman repeats the Hebrew error. Let me read from Dorman's book. It's in the article too, but I think this is important because this is going to show something else, because someone will be like, what are you trying to show? This also shows, frankly, that Matthew was out here training other guys, because Matthew set up schools to train a lot of people, and a bunch of people branched out of him, not just the Commandment Keepers. Sometimes people don't realize how influential this small congregation was. There could have been up to 6 to a dozen or more groups that came out of the Commandment Keepers. We actually don't know entirely how many. And he's teaching people Hebrew, but he doesn't know Hebrew. And the evidence is, how else would he make this mistake? So let me read this here, and you'll see it in the article if you look at the article in front of you as well, brother. Check this out. I'm going to read here, this page 168 of Dorman. What makes the derivation of Matthew's diagram from de Lawrence's diagram indisputable is the fact that de Lawrence has included a calligraphic error in the Hebrew that Matthew has repeated. The word at the bottom, ha-ko-ak, meaning the power, has been miswritten. An errant vertical line closes the gap of the middle letter, ka, making it look like an uppercase D. In fact, there is no Hebrew letter with that shape. But in Matthew's diagram, it is in the exact same place underneath the intersection of the diagonals. And Matthew has repeated the same mistake in the letter Kaf, demonstrating that he used de Lawrence's text as a source for his Kabbalistic science. The two amulets shed light. I'm going to read a little bit further here, but that's fascinating here. The two amulets shed light on Matthew's esoteric theology, part of the secret knowledge at the heart of his Black Israelite belief. Matthew wrote several phrases in fractured Hebrew in the diagram, the top one of which can be translated, rise and give me good luck. Just below the median line, the Hebrew can be translated, within the eighth fire, you should give me life. And at the bottom line may read either the eighth God should be my father, or the eighth God, my father. And I know that Alfred already read this. I'm just reiterating. At the simplest level, this diagram appears to be a good luck charm, but at a deeper level, this amulet amplifies and expands on Matthew's theology. In later decades, Matthews taught that there were 7 spirits or elements of God and 12 heavens, which his daughter explicated in the Congregational newspaper in 1965. And that stuff, when you study Kabbalah, that's the kind of weird stuff you come across in Kabbalah, which is very mysterious in and of itself. But I mean, he repeated an error that was in de Lawrence's book. And so that shows you how that it's from his, and for comparison, he has both of them here back on the book. You can see him. And again, this was in the book, but I never kind of quite caught onto it, though I saw it in the manuscript in the library.
But to continue where you was quoting from, it says, right, in later decades, Matthew taught that there were 7 spirits or elements of God and 12 heavens, which his daughter explicated in the Congregational newspaper in 1965. Do you know how few of us, the Black Jews, know what God is? And interesting how she takes the O out, because like rabbinical Judaism, they don't say the actual name of God, even the title God, even though that's not his name, is wind, water, fire, life, light, power, and mind. This is God, the 7 elements. Each one of these elements are all gods among themselves. But the creator of these, the one ruler of these, is the one and only. He is God. He is in us, out of us, and is all about us. And without him, we wouldn't exist. Without any one of these gods, without any one of these gods, we wouldn't exist. And here's another amulet that he wrote with his own pen. The second round amulet repeats and amplifies this sense of God's immanence and Matthew's own power. The diagram consists of several Hebrew sentences printed over a Magen David, literally a shield of David, or a six-pointed star, which is a common Kabbalistic referent. After some undecipherable words at the beginning of the prayer, the sentence continues. Eighth God, come to me in the flood. The words overlaid on the top of the Magen David itself can be translated, the name of God is in me. The Lord my God, exalted Lord God is in me. My God will see me, my Father God. In this second amulet, Matthew emphasizes and underlines the immanence of God. After asking God to enter him, quote, in a flood, he triumphantly proclaims, the name of God is in me. So here, another primary source of him writing these incantations, conjuring the eighth God, whoever that is. J.D. Davis is like, what in the Captain Planet is going on? Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, he's almost, Dorman puts out, this is almost like Matthew showing like he has a messianic connection with God. Like this is something, if it was Orthodox, it seems like something maybe the Messiah could say. For example, it's this is interesting what Dorman says. It is even possible that through the ritual use of these amulets and incantations, Matthew believed himself able to unify the triune parts of the holiness Pentecostal Godhead. God is the Father, he is the Son, and they meet via the medium of the eighth fire or the Holy Spirit. So this is like mixing and matching all kinds of things, We know that Matthew
God like Voltron. So God's Voltron, and he has the ability to summon Voltron. Like,
I don't know. I mean, but this shows how esoteric and weird, And the thing is, like with Christianity, we don't doubt or deny that there's things that we talk about that are for more mature believers. There's milk and there's meat, but we don't have secret practices and rituals. We don't have things where like, hey, no, man, you can't know about. We never have, despite early pagans accusing us of such. We've never had that kind of thing. Christianity is a very public religion, and a lot of these other groups not so. I mean, that's part of the draw. That's part of like what goes on, right? Like the Mormons, like secret recorded temple ceremonies come out, and we get to see what they do for their sealing ceremonies and stuff. But it's like a big mystery before that. Check this out, though. What Dorman says on page 171. We know that Matthew used these and other diagrams and prayers. They did not simply end up among his personal papers. Listen to this. In 1938, a European Jewish visitor mentioned a prayer that the rabbi has composed himself and which he speaks before he lifts the Torah. The sentences have lost their sense almost entirely because of the most impossible distortions, changes, and confusions, end quote. A reporter in 1946 described the Commandment Keepers congregation on the corner of 128th and Lenox as a, quote, dingy three-story red brick building, every window of which displays the Star of David. Some of these stars have an eye in the center with the inscription underneath, Royal Order of Ethiopian Jews. By the way, remember, that's like the name of their lodge, I believe. Mm-hmm. There's also a 1959 picture of Matthew's son-in-law, Norman Dore, pointing out a similar Magen David with circular elements to Matthew's grandson, David Dore. Matthew's polycultural version of Judaism may have been unorthodox, but the fact that he began to practice Judaism distinguished him and his followers from the holiness-based charismatic leaders who had come before. So these are Kabbalistic diagrams. He's saying that he's got, Kabbalistic, Kabbalistic powers, basically, magic. Right. It's just okay, man. I'm just tripping out here.
But I mean, so with that being said, and us showcasing this, fast forwarding today, and you may mention this in the beginning of our show. What are some of the lingering effects of Rabbi Wentworth's magical leanings towards today's current One West theology?
Well, let me,
if any.
Yeah. there's one, just one of the things about some of the esoteric elements of Matthew. There's a visitor in 1966 who describes Wentworth Matthew's desk and describes 2 Coca-Cola bottles wrapped in tinfoil and holding the stars and stripes. And what's interesting about this, apparently I didn't know this, flags and covered bottles are not neutral items in the Afro-Atlantic religions, but are in fact highly potent means for attracting and containing spirits. There is a long history of their use in Haitian voodoo, as well as in other African-based religions of the Caribbean. In fact, American flags are commonly used in altars of Black Hawk shrines among the Black spiritualists of New Orleans, whose female members wear white habits similar to those worn by female members of Matthew's congregation. Those flags and Coca-Cola bottles in Matthew's desk may have been simply patriotic emblems, but in the hidden transcript, they could have been pledges of allegiance to the alternative religiosity of Black spiritual churches. I didn't know that about that, but the Coca-Cola bottles wrapped in tinfoil holding flags apparently is a thing.
Wow.
Did you know that? And so it's interesting that that's at his desk.
So he had 2 ghost traps.
That's like what I thought. That's what I was thinking of. I was thinking of Ghostbusters with the little. That's literally what the
proton packs captures and you put it in the bottle. I guess That's crazy.
That's exactly the kind of thing I was thinking. And check this out. There's so much. This is strange. It's weird. Can't all these. I don't know. Check this out. Listen to this. In 1966, there's a guy who's one of Wentworth Matthew's students, Rabbi L.A. McKeithen, and listen to what he says about Wentworth Matthew. This is why Matthew's still alive. Many brilliant men fell by the wayside, and some committed suicide under the Depression. It is here our leader, our emancipator, proved to be not just a man, but the man. Many have referred to him as being 7 men in one, truly another great Moses. And apparently, when Matthew's congregants would view his powers, they would say certain things. For example, there's a female member that was heard to shout, "Our rabbi is an angel. He will lead us all to heaven." So it's interesting, we like this Wentworth Matthew had sort of the cult personality like a lot of Hebrew Israelites still do. So I guess he's saying they still use this Coca-Cola
on the shrines of Kemetic Orthodox cults. I did not know that.
I didn't know this was a thing, man. Until this is like we're learning stuff live, bro.
Let me find out Jabari. He's sipping on some Coca-Cola in the shrine.
He's actually, Jabari's over there. Vocab doesn't understand the colors that the red and the white can conjure. If he understood that, he wouldn't be laughing. Now, he is a European, has no right to laugh at Coca-Cola bottles trapping ghosts. But maybe he should think before he laughs. Have a Coca and smile, Vocab.
Hotel.
I don't know, man.
Oh man.
So this is some stuff, man. This is some stuff. Okay, so you were saying about like,
yeah, I mean, the lingering effects of some of this stuff. Like, do we see some of that in today's Hebrew Israelism? Whether it's One West, the moderates, Torah only, maybe Torah only, I would think.
Yeah, this shows us, I think because we haven't got as much into the Torah only guys, that there's kind of like this assumption for some of us, like, well, maybe they're a little more healthy, than like some of these One West Hebrew Israelites. Maybe they are, even though like obviously they don't accept Jesus as Messiah. Maybe they're more reasonable type of thing. But the more I've been looking into Torah only groups, I'm finding problem after problem after problem, including Kabbalistic science. And so
and high fructose syrup.
Yeah, you're right. Well, who knows in those days? Maybe it was when they still put the real Coke in or something. I don't know.
Oh wow! Hey.
Not at that. I don't think in the 60s. But anyways, I'm just saying. So, but it shows, I think, the unhealthy nature of a lot of it, and I think part of it is because, look, man, Hebrew Israelism's heart is to essentially make an idol out of ethnicity. Now, we could debate or discuss whether the ethnic claim is accurate. And usually, from what I've seen, it's usually inaccurate. but the ethnicity that's perceived. So we'll just say, but to turn it essentially into an idol. And that is why a lot of Hebrews are willing to accept all kinds of egregious error from leaders or followers or whoever it is, people, as long as they get that one thing right, because that trumps all of the things in their system for a lot of these guys. It trumps whether you accept Jesus Christ as Messiah. It trumps, you just go down the list, and it trumps all that as long as you got that. That's why they'll say, well, they may be wrong on this, but at least they're preaching the truth about this. Like this low bar of, as long as you recognize that we're the Israelites, right, other stuff can be forgiven almost. Right. And I think there's that with their leaders too. And they look back on their pioneers, and this stuff is like not basically as bothersome as it should be to them, because it's like, well, at least they were pioneers. They taught we were the Israelites, so it's okay. I'm just saying, I feel like I get some of that. There's a minimizing of it because of the grand importance that they made this ethnic identity claim, that other things just don't matter as much. It's almost like what's major on the major and minor on the minors. Right. And so I think that's why they're willing to brush some of this under the rug, And another thing is, I think it shows the multiple elements of input in Hebrew Israelism even today. And that's why we are meeting Hebrew Israelites who claim to be Muslims and Roman Catholics. That's why we're meeting Hebrew Israelites who have all these different views. And it's like, why is the religion so diverse? Part of it is because that's kind of how it started, with this multiple mixture. And it's not very Hebraic. You look at it and you're like, this is not truly Hebraic, not at least in the biblical sense. And I think you also see some of the weirdness that we don't often discuss has always been a part of Hebrew Israelism. I don't know if people know, but the mighty Hebrew, he's the guy who always goes, hallelujah. Right. He's into Kabbalah. He's into Kabbalistic science. Right. And someone that I respect greatly for his intellect and articulation, Zion Lex is into Kabbalah. Yeah. And they're directly from the Old Testament or Tanakh only side of things of Hebrew Israelism. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's probably even a stronger connection there. But then when you jump over to One West and the Seven Heads, there's a book, I forget what it's called now, Keys to the Kingdom or something like that. The old timers know what it is. I forget what it's something with keys in the title. The Seven Keys, something like that. The Keys to Daniel, something like that. The old timers, if they listen to the show, know what I'm talking about, because the old timers tell me. This book basically had information about how you can utilize certain things to control demons. And some of the Seven Heads were getting into this stuff, and some people had a problem with it. They thought it was a problem. And it's an interesting question, like, how do we know this wasn't the kind of thing they were hearing all the way back at the Commandment Keepers, or that was kind of brought over as a carryover? Mm-hmm. Because apparently it wouldn't have been that far afield to look into something like how to control demons. That wouldn't have been that big of a deal.
Well, that's a major part in Solomonic magic, right? That supposedly
that's it. Keys of Solomon.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah, he would use the shield of the Magen David to control this creature called the Golem. And supposedly he created the Golem to help create the temple. So he conjured hired help to make the temple. That's part of the Solomonic magic. So
yeah, but that's it. The key, I think it's the key of Solomon. The magical keys of Solomon, something like that, or the secret man. That's it. Exactly. Yeah. So that's
again book that book you find all up and down Brooklyn and Harlem. The open door,
really?
Open air. Oh yeah.
So see, this stuff is in the air of New York. Not every place is like New York in that sense. New York is special with a lot of these things. So it's interesting to hear you say, like, I know about this. I've been seeing that. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Now so
I bet you, as time goes on, Alfredo, we'll see a few things happen. One, ex-members are going to leave some of these groups. They're going to tell us so-and-so was into some weird magic occultic stuff the whole time. Mm-hmm. Like some leader or someone who's prominent within these groups, like, that they were into some of this weird. I'm not saying in every group or every person. I'm just saying I think we'll get more and more of, like, not just from the old timers, but like from our current era, people are going to come out and say, yeah, so-and-so was into some of this stuff. I believe this is sort of prediction based upon my understanding of current trends and stuff and things like that. The other thing I think that we'll see is maybe some groups, and I'm not saying IUIC tomorrow, but I'm saying these could be smaller groups, these could be individuals with followings, but more people identifying as Hebrew Israelites getting into the mysticism and magical elements of Hebrew Israelism. I think you'll see that kind of come back around. And I could almost see like some Hebrew Israelites being like, hey, well, Wentworth Matthew did it. Good enough for him, good enough for me. Let me look into this.
Sure.
I bet there's someone out there who purchased the 67th book of Moses based upon this show. Oh, really? Let me get into that. We'd be
surprised how many Hebrews probably do have that book.
Yeah, seriously. I'm telling you, man, there's a lot that goes on because it's not a public religion. They have all these layers of stuff, and they're much more willing to say one thing in public and have another thing in private. Yep. We know that's a reality with these Hebrew Israelite groups. We know that for sure. And all this, so this is all like a reality, and it goes back apparently to the beginning, and it makes sense because this is what the Masons do as well. And there's a big heavy Mason connection with the beginning of Hebrew Islam as well. Right. And I bet you if we did more research, we could even find other connections. Look, who is the first person that did this? The pose.
Yeah.
Who's the first person who taught everyone to do that? Right. Nobody knows. They just do it. Right. Do even most Hebrew Israelites know what this is supposed to mean? Like what it actually is supposed to? I bet you the ultimate source for that is somebody that ripped it off from the Masons. Now some of this is me sort of speculating into the air. Okay.
Right.
I've told everybody, let me look at the camera. I told everyone this is something we know, and here's a picture of it at certain points in the show.
Right.
Or this is something, and then other stuff I'm saying, here's the speculation, here's speculation. So understand, I want everyone to understand that. But nonetheless, I think enough has been seen that people should be greatly concerned about this movement because all this stuff doesn't just get shook off. I mean, we have a mutual friend who says, I'm going to soften the way he says it, but he says elements of certain parts of Hebrew Israelism have the fingerprints of Satan on them. And when you start talking about dark magic and that kind of stuff, it's hard not to disagree with a statement like that. Remember, Wentworth Matthew claimed to be able to teach people how to make the rain stop, said he could read people's thoughts.
He could disappear.
That he could disappear. And he's got people in his congregation claiming that they saw him disappear with their own eyes. Even though, notice, these magic elements of the Commandment Keepers are from multiple sources. Like it's a visitor stated this when they saw Howard Bratz, who was an early, I guess you might call him ethnographer, although I don't think that term existed back then. Not sure on that, but I don't think that's what they would call him back then. But did that attested to this as well. Dorman, and then we have their private manuscripts, so you can't. I bet you someone's going to be like, oh, that's just myth quotes and the white man making up stuff, or someone's going to think that, despite the multiple sources and multiple lines of evidence, including things directly from his own hand. And some Hebrew Israelites are going to also be like, Wentworth Matthew, who's that? I don't know who that is. I don't care. All I know is I'm an Israelite, and this guy taught me over here. And there's no sense of like, who came before you to set this up?
Right.
Because you're going to claim it was Moses or something, but what about, let's leave that alone for a second, table that. What about like right now? Who, like the first guy you heard this from, who taught them that? Where did they hear it from?
Right.
And a lot of it's going to go back to the Commandment Keepers, because it goes like this. If you came out of One West and you're in any One West influence group, you go back to the Commandment Keepers, because One West came out of the Commandment Keepers.
Right.
I'm not associating everything by guilt, but I'm just saying Wentworth Matthew is relevant to every One West camp and to a lot of the Torah only groups, because a lot of them came out of him. Like they were at the forefront of the kind of Black Judaism movement as well. Even if they didn't come out of him or get trained by him, they were influenced by him, because there was more groups prior to the Depression of Black Jews in New York, but they didn't all survive the Depression. And Wentworth Matthew was one of the ones who came out on the other side, still around. His group was intact in essence, right? And so, like, he was doing a lot of the heavy lifting when it came to Black Judaism in America for a long time. And he didn't die until, like, I think the early 70s or something. Like he could have been alive. Who knows, where he was when the group that left the Commandment Keepers, even though I don't think he was in charge at that time, and left and started One West. He could have still been alive when that happened. In fact, I think he was according to the chronology. So this shows the immediate connection. And some of those people are still alive.
Right.
Some of those people are still alive today. They're in the ICGJC, or they're in their own other camps. They're still alive today, including Ariah, who was a young boy at the Commandment Keepers. Ariah attended and even had his bar mitzvah at the Commandment Keepers. We have a picture of it. We have Ariah's bar mitzvah. It's a picture. And it took place with the Commandment Keepers congregation, which shows, again, the Judaistic practices, that they had at their group there.
Yeah, bro. Next time you come to New York, we're going to go to these Black-owned bookstores. All these sources are still being printed. I grew up seeing all this around me. Like, I saw the 6th, 7th Book of Moses, Enochian magic grimoires. You could go downtown Fulton Street and buy it for like $10. Seriously. And then in the 80s and 90s, you had the Ansar Allah community, which, of course, morphed into the Islamic Hebrew, which morphed into the Nuwabians, right? So you had that, and they had their own books that they sold, right? Because he had his own version of the Book of the Dead, his own version of the Torah, his own version of the Quran. Then you have these other booksellers that had these grimoires. And then you have the 5% Nation. Then you have like these esoteric Kemetic shrines that just started coming. All this was in the same time in the 80s and 90s. So so next time you come to New York, we gotta take a look at these Black-owned bookstores.
I'm 100% down. That's exactly what I want to see.
All these books are still circulation.
And everybody, hey, listen, you got a unique person in BK Apologist, because not only does he study and do the research and he's consistent in his content, but like he's lived right there. He's lived the life. It's part of the environment. You can say, I don't have that. I'm in Columbus. I'm a Midwest kid. I had some friends in high school who are Nation of Islam, but it's nothing on the level of, Alfredo, and so I just encourage everyone to, continue to support my man Alfredo and realize, hey man, this dude's got a unique set of gifts and background environment that the Lord uses him. Just like, it's a smaller level, but hey, the Lord prepared the Apostle Paul to be apostle to the Gentiles, and each one of us in our own life, he prepares too and sends out. And I think, Alfredo, you're the BK apologist for a reason.
Well, thank you, bro. That's very humbling. I appreciate that. But yeah, guys, we just wanted to share some of the history of a lot of the doctrines that we defend against. And again, the next time you hear these accusations that we're some sort of whitewash religion, you can remind them about their homeboy de Laurence, the Frenchy white dude. They need to go look at him real quick before they talk about us, right?
Or if they start banging on Jews who are into Kabbalah, it's like, well, hold on there now.
Wait a minute.
I'm no fan of Kabbalah either, but let's take a look at this guy.
Little amulet I like to show you real quick.
Yeah. And a rabbit foot by any other name is still a rabbit foot.
Right. Absolutely. But man, this has been great, Vocab. Let the people know what's coming up in your immediate future, because you're kind of back on YouTube now, right? You kind of snuck in.
Yeah, well, so I have 2 channels, and so I'm putting up a couple things on my Street Apologist channel. That's the channel without the strike, right?
The channel without the strike.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's going to happen tomorrow. As of now, it's scheduled for tomorrow, but sometime this week, David Wood and I are going to go live on my normal YouTube channel while I still have the strike. And we're going to talk about YouTube being broken.
Okay.
And talk about what's going on with YouTube, the system, how it relates to apologetics, and also some of the good work that David Wood is doing on Twitter. Because he's basically got a stir the pot campaign going on over there, Twitter, against YouTube. And we're going to talk about all that. So it's going to be relating to apologetics if you do apologetics in the social media context. And so that's popping off. And I'm working on a couple other things. We'll see what happens, what doesn't happen. But this Sunday is Reformation Sunday. And so I'll probably put out little things where I talk about the 95 Thesis and some other little things too. So I'm trying to cover a lot this week, man.
That's what's up. All right. So any last words, Vocab, before we're out of here, sir?
Well, the only word I have to say is, you thought only Rabbi Wentworth Matthew could do it. But without the use of Kabbalistic science or anything like that, I also want you to be able to watch me disappear before your own eyes. I can do it too. Watch this.
God, man. He disappeared for my very eyes. He is an angel from Arizona. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are out of here. Peace.
Oh.